Welcome to Resist the Empire, a libertarian view of the Star Wars universe. This is your one-stop shop for news, events, and topics in the Star Wars canon. From a libertarian perspective, here are your hosts, Brian McQuaid and Roger Paxton.
And welcome to Resist the Empire. My name is Brian McQuaid.
And I am Roger Paxton.
And we're going to talk to you tonight about learning the ropes, because that's what I'm doing, and that's kind of what we're both doing tonight. This is my first time podcasting, and so this is all new to me. I'm getting my bearings, and Roger's doing some new video testing, so he's got some new stuff going on as well.
Yeah.
So we're going to first start off with a little bit about us. Kind of how we got to where we were, where we are today in liberty and libertarianism, and then we're going to move on to some Star Wars things. So I'm pretty new to libertarianism. I wanted to get involved in the liberty movement somehow. I love my state of New Hampshire. That's where we're both at. And so I wanted to get involved, so I just started looking into the political scene, because I wanted to get involved politically as well. And I actually took the step of looking through the different parties' platforms and whatnot.
And that's pretty unusual. Most people don't.
No. And I'm pretty sure that, most of the people I've talked to have never even looked at their own party's platform, to be honest.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to make sure that I wanted to find the party that kind of fit my ideals, and the Libertarian Party was where it was at. So I kind of looked down the platform, and it kind of fit how I live my life. And I've always been an anti-war kind of guy. So I mean, I want peace. I think it's silly that we go fight wars in other countries. And,
You're here.
So that's and we learned from an early age that, and I describe it in layman's terms to people. Well, what's a libertarian? To me, a libertarian is I don't hurt people and I don't take their stuff, and that's pretty much it at its most basic level.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about what libertarianism is, it's a very basic philosophy. There's not a whole lot to it. There's a lot of people who try to add a lot to it, but really all libertarianism is it's just the statement that you are against the initiation of force. And basically what that means is that, like Brian said, you're not going to hit people and you're not going to take their stuff. You're not going to do anything that harms others. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't defend ourselves against force. We can defend ourselves against a person who initiates force against us, whether they're trying to rob us or hurt us. And some libertarians, including myself, consider themselves to be what they call anarcho-capitalist or voluntarist. Even anarchist is a term that's used. And I'm not talking the black flag waving anarchists that destroy Starbucks. I'm talking about anarchists in the term of we just don't, we don't think there should be government. Anarchist means no government. And we believe that because the government itself initiates force against us. When it uses taxation to take money from us to fight foreign wars or whatever the case may be, regardless of what the money's being used for. That is the initiation of force. Taxation is theft, believe it or not. But then that goes into how I became a libertarian and where I come from. So I've been a libertarian for a little over a decade now, and mine started off in the mid-'90s with learning about Ron Paul and what he believed, but I still had a lot of disagreements with Ron Paul. I didn't agree with him that we should end the drug war because drugs are bad and drugs hurt people. And I thought that we were doing the right thing to try to stop people from hurting themselves with drugs, even though that was their own choice. I also disagreed with him on immigration. I believed that as a country, we should be able to not allow people into our country that we don't want into our country. And I evolved, and over the next, decade or so, I followed Ron Paul and watched him, and then I started reading some Ayn Rand on the recommendation of a friend. And Ayn Rand, even though she didn't consider herself a libertarian and didn't like the term libertarian, she was a libertarian. And reading her books, it really made me, I could not refute the logic, not only in her fiction books, but also her nonfiction books. I couldn't refute the logic. And I'm the kind of person that if I can't refute the logic, then I've got to look into it deeper. So I started looking into Ron Paul again even deeper and really liked what the guy had to say and, became a libertarian. And so then I worked, within the Libertarian Party of Arkansas. I was the chair for quite a while and worked in that party for quite some time. I moved up here to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project. My wife and I are early movers for the Free State Project, which is trying to get 20,000 libertarians in the state of New Hampshire to basically affect change and to make the state more free. Liberty in our lifetime, as the motto is for the Free State Project. And then, I've met Brian and hundreds of other libertarians here, and we really are working on that change. We just got constitutional carry in the state, working on decriminalization of marijuana and many other things even outside of politics. So that's really where I come from, and that's where I am here now. So
yeah, and you're much more of a reader than I am. I don't read very much, and one thing I've encountered a lot in the liberty movement and the people within it, there's a lot of readers. I'm actually not one of those. I kind of just discovered it within myself when I went to go and look for it. I mean, I'm more likely to read Game of Thrones or Star Wars or comic books and whatnot. And some of that stuff, it gets into the weeds too much for me, and it's not very. It's just honestly, it's like a little boring to me. Yeah. And so for me, it's kind of, well, how do I feel, about these things? So it was kind of through discovery of myself how it led me to liberty.
Yeah. Yeah, and that happens with a lot of people. A lot of people who aren't readers, and it's like my wife used to say, I'm a libertarian because it just makes sense. And it does. If you don't believe in hurting other people, then and you wrap your life around that philosophy, then you're a libertarian. It's that simple. But if you believe that the government, it's okay for the government to take money from people for wars or for, whatever the case may be, then you're not a libertarian. It's it's a very simple philosophy. You also don't believe that you can take something from your neighbor, even if they're not using it. I mean, anything that you're doing that causes harm to another human being is immoral. So that's basically libertarianism and a little bit about us.
Yep.
So let's move on to our first segment.
The Holonet, your news source for current real-world news with a libertarian Star Wars twist.
So, recently in the news, we've got the Betsy DeVos situation regarding her position within the head of education or in the education department. And so she barely won this vote. It was like 51-50, this margin.
And it was pretty much across partisan lines, of course.
Yeah. And so obviously there was, with all that's going on with that, it kind of got me to thinking about, the education in the Star Wars universe. Now we know the Empire, it is laden with propaganda, and we all know this. In fact, you even see the propaganda signs, the posters that they're great. All the different Star Wars posters.
Resist the Empire, folks.
Yes, resist the Empire. So this got me to thinking a little bit more. Like, okay, well, there's clear indoctrination, on the side of the Empire, but is it really much different than the Jedi Academy? And, here we have children that are taken from a very young age. They're obviously, very impressionable when they're taken because they're essentially taken right after infancy almost in most of these cases. And
because Anakin was too old, and he was what, 8 or something?
Yeah.
7 or 8?
Yeah, so they were taken from very young age. And now I tried to do a little research into, how they go about removing the children from the family situation. And there's not a whole lot in canon, but there is some examples of this. But I feel really that there's a bit of a pressure on the parents, like, to go ahead and do this, almost as if they're not doing their part, to help protect the galaxy by sending their child, if they're granted with this special gift of the Force, and moving them into the Jedi Order. And then once they get there, they're very impressionable. They have to rely on the masters.
Sure. And, that brings up the question, are the children, taken against their will? I mean, generally the parents, I assume, approve of this because the Jedi has a high reputation and, the parents approve of it. But the children are, before the age of consent.
Yeah.
So, and that brings up a whole different discussion of age of consent laws. But, if you're taking a child basically just right out of his infancy, that child doesn't have the reasoning ability or the reasoning skills to be able to consent to something like that. So technically you are, doing this against his consent, even if he does give consent, because, what consent can a 2-year-old give? But at the same time, as a parent, you do lots of things with your children that may or may not be against their consent. You may put them to bed early and they may not want to go to bed yet, at 2 years old, but, they don't know. So that brings up a whole lot of other issues as well. It seems like, based on, the reading that I've done, that it does seem like it is, pretty much a given that, these kids are going to be taken and that there's not much that's going to stop it. So it does seem to me an initiation of force. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. In some of the situations that I was reading, is the Jedi would only be allowed to take without the parents' consent when it was an orphan or something like this.
Right. Of course, at that point, there's no parent to give consent.
Exactly. The concern for me, other than we're removing this child from their parentage, is they're trained in the Jedi Order. Many that are trained in the Jedi Order, they don't end up becoming Jedi. They end up going into other parts of the Order that helps assist the Jedi in other manners. There's many different councils, many different parts of the Order where they do other things that help support the Jedi, whether it's logistics, etc.
So there's like a janitorial council.
Yeah. There's like the people that really didn't make the cut.
I couldn't see Obi-Wan Kenobi cleaning the toilets, so there's got to be somebody there to do it.
Yeah, and he actually almost didn't make the cut either. He was a much older, I guess, Padawan, and right before Qui-Gon Jinn took him on, and apparently he was at that age where he almost didn't make it into the Order, which I think is very interesting, given we consider him as one of the most powerful Jedi out there. And
that's interesting that he was a disciple of Qui-Gon, and of course so was Anakin, and he was too old as well. So that's fascinating. But
to get back to my original concern is that they're kind of locked into this Jedi Order. If they want to leave. We were discussing whether this is actually a voluntary organization, because I said the Jedi Council is a bit akin to a government. Sure, you could voluntarily leave, but it's not well looked upon.
Right. Ahsoka's a perfect example.
Yeah.
She was able to leave, and she was looked down upon, but she came back in Rebels and actually did some good.
What I would say about Ahsoka, though, is she was really looked down upon before her trial. So, and they let her go because they took her, I don't know what you call it, the Padawan thing that goes in the head
the
or
hair
whatever.
Thing, right?
Yeah.
The braid.
And they were going to give her that back, like, hey, we're letting you back in kind of thing. And then she was like, no, thanks.
Right.
Like, you guys dumped me. So that was kind of a different situation where they actually, I think, severed that tie. But it's very rare we see an incident like where a Jedi can leave.
Yeah. And the Ahsoka story, all of that happened in Clone Wars later. Gosh, that was a late season. So if you're interested in checking that out, definitely look at the Clone Wars.
Yep, love the Clone Wars.
Yep.
So what we don't see is, one, kind of what happens to these Jedi that flame out.
Right.
But two, they're essentially there their entire lives. And what is their choice? What are they going to do if they leave? They know nothing else. So they're almost locked into this. So sure, it might be voluntary in a sense, but I imagine for most of them it feels mandatory.
Sure. And I mean, what did Ahsoka do when she left? I mean, one thing I always found fascinating about Ahsoka is her lightsaber was now gray after she left, which is just fascinating. And I wonder if she had to if they took her lightsaber from her and she had to reconstruct her own. That's certainly fascinating. But,
Yep.
but yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a retirement plan for the Jedi. I think that they're there until they die. I mean, look at Yoda. Of course, he ended up after Order 66, he was on Dagobah, but he was so old. He was right at 900 years old that he was probably going to die on the Jedi Council. So I don't think there's a retirement plan, but they definitely can voluntarily leave.
Yeah, and there was that other older Jedi, I can't think, that was helping Ahsoka find her lightsaber in that one episode.
Yeah, what was it?
But
yeah.
that was a really cool episode.
Yeah.
I like that. It was a whole arc. Yeah.
So, so I guess in a nutshell, while there is some initiation of force in the Jedi Council as far as taking the children, there is also a little bit of consent there, at least from the parents, and they're allowed to voluntarily leave. So, is the Jedi Council an initiation of force? Yeah, I would probably have to say so.
Yeah, I think so. And the other thing is the council itself. They have this overarching authority, essentially.
Sure.
There's X number of seats on that council, and you got to do what they say. Hey, Obi-Wan and Anakin, we need you to go to this planet. Do it. Yeah. There's not going to be much argument there.
Right.
They can't really do anything about that.
Right.
They're pretty much told when they need to go fight, which sounds to me like our modern day military.
And you did mention that the Jedis do feel the loss of individuals, and in some respects they do respect individual rights, but at the same time they don't, because relationships were looked down upon.
Yeah.
Anakin and Padme, for example, Obi-Wan and Sabine. Sabine, right?
No, Satine.
Satine, right?
Yeah.
Satine. So I mean, those were definitely frowned upon and kind of had to be kept, under wraps. But again, that's a voluntary association. I guess they know the rules. I know that I can't, walk into my office at work without any clothes on or with improper clothes, because I have a voluntary arrangement with them that, I'm going to follow their rules. So I guess that, they understand the rules. So,
So I mean, I think that pretty much covers, the education, of the children. I don't really know. We kind of don't see where they go after that. It seems voluntary looking at it from the outside, but they feel pressured to stay in.
Sure.
So I would agree that there's some use of force there.
It certainly is a fine line.
Yeah.
Either way.
Yeah,
So
it's a very close line. Not quite the Empire.
right. Not quite the First Order.
The Holonet, your news source for current real-world news with a libertarian Star Wars twist. Which Star Wars canon character will we dissect in this episode of Galaxy's Smallest Political Quiz?
So the Galaxy's Smallest Quiz is our next segment.
So this is a little bit of a twist on the world's smallest political quiz. For those of you who are listening who are libertarians, the Advocates for Self-Government puts out the world's smallest political quiz, and it was pretty much derived from the Nolan chart, which was designed by David Nolan, who was the founder of the Libertarian Party. And this chart basically, this quiz goes through very simple 10 questions and kind of plots you on this diamond sort of chart to see where you are in relation to in politics. So on the left, you have, of course, the left liberal. On the right, you have the conservatives. At the bottom of the diamond, you have statists or big government people. In the middle, you have the centrists, and then at the top, you have libertarians. So this quiz will kind of help plot you on where you stand politically.
Yeah.
So we thought it would be kind of fun to take Star Wars characters and do this with Star Wars characters, which is going to be really cool. The problem is there's a lot of the questions on this quiz that aren't really Star Wars compatible. Social Security, for example. I mean, how do you answer whether or not a character agrees with Social Security in Star Wars? So as this goes on, we're going to kind of massage these questions a little bit. And if you have some questions that you think would be really good for us to add into this mix and remove some of the other ones, please send us an email. You can send an email to Brian, Brian, at resisttheempirepodcast.com, and he can definitely get this added into our list. So who are we looking at this week, Brian?
Yeah, so today we're taking a look at Yoda, and you'd think with so much involvement with this main character in this series that he'd kind of be easier to pinpoint. And we actually had a hard time with some of these questions.
We did,
on here.
yeah. Well, and again, that's because some of them just don't fit in the Star Wars world.
Yeah, you have tax things and stuff like that. So it's tough, but some of this stuff we could figure out. We see him as the ultimate teacher. This is a philosopher, and yeah, there were things that Yoda still needed to learn. He put too much trust into the council system.
Well, yeah, and he even learned from Qui-Gon on the becoming a Force ghost.
Yeah,
which,
exactly.
Even shows that even at 900 years old, he's still learning.
Still had something to learn.
Right.
Yeah, and so these are things that we kind of had to look into. All right, well, is Yoda someone that would be in favor or not of a national ID card? Is we had to put maybe for that. Yeah, we don't know.
Right, and that's one that, we definitely need to get replaced with something that's more Star Wars compatible. So please send us some questions that would fit for a national ID card.
Yeah, so Yoda, after kind of going through our quiz here, he kind of fell in the centrist area. And I think one of our biggest hang-ups when we were discussing Yoda was, all right, well, is he in favor of government? Because the Jedi have to be subsidized in some way,
sure,
right, by the Senate.
I mean, it's not like they have a product to sell. They're not selling much.
Right.
Now, but talking about that, you bring up a really good point. They have a service they could provide. So they could really, if they restructure their organization, privatize and sell their services to the galactic to the Senate.
Yeah, they could. And I don't know if it's just something they didn't want to do, or they just kind of maybe it happened long before Yoda got involved. And who knows what the original founders set up with the Galactic Senate.
And that's a perfect analogy for what's going on today. We have police forces today that keep the peace supposedly, but they're all government subsidized. They could easily privatize, and we see that in private security and private police forces around the world. So absolutely, the Jedi could have done the same thing.
Yeah, and so that was kind of one where we had a bit of an argument. We had disagree that there should not be a draft, though I would say that Yoda already kind of had his army there. So
well, but that brings up a good point as well. Are the clone armies drafted? I mean, they're created specifically for that purpose.
That's true. We see later on that they are individuals. So even though they're all the same physically, they're clearly their own individuals when we get to know them through the Clone Wars series.
And we do see that some clones quit. And were able to go their own way too. So that is voluntary in that respect.
Yep, that's true. There was a couple different episodes where one was knocked out or something, and his whole rest of his troop left him, and he was stuck on this planet, and he ended up helping. I'm trying to think which episode that was, but helping the rebels get off of that planet, and and then there was another one where he had started a family, and he didn't want to go back, So.
So I'm just going to run through these real quickly, and we can talk about them individually. Government should not censor speech, press, media, or the internet. And I think that Yoda would probably... I think that he might agree that they should not censor speech, but you put disagree, and I can kind of see that.
Yeah, I mean, so... All right, so when we look at it as a libertarian, we don't think that government should censor anything at all. Right. That's just not what we believe in. Right. We believe in free speech. We believe in free press. We see what's going on now.
But that doesn't mean that I shouldn't be able to censor speach on my property.
Well, exactly. So that's private.
Yeah, you can't come to my property and stand at my door and scream at me all night long because you're on my property. And I can make those rules, but the government should not.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So what else we got here?
Military service should be voluntary. There should be no draft. We talk about that, and we say he disagrees. Yeah. There should be no laws regarding sex for consenting adults.
Yeah, we put agree for this one. I think kind of the only bit of contention here was this is talking specifically about sex, it's not talking about marriage,
Right.
which was kind of the big thing with, say, Anakin and Padme,
Right.
whereas that's an attachment. That's different than, sex is essentially a temporary attachment, I suppose, but you make that a more permanency. Now all of a sudden you're depending on this person.
And it's pretty clear that Obi-Wan was probably having sex with Satine. I mean,
Yeah.
there's almost no doubt about it, just based on their relationship in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, it's very likely.
Repeal laws prohibiting adult possession and use of drugs.
Yeah. So we did agree with this one. I don't really know that we discussed too much on this.
Well, there was the scene in was it episode 2 where they had the death sticks in the bar.
Yeah.
And Obi-Wan told him to quit selling them and go reevaluate his life.
Yeah. Now it's Obi-Wan, not Yoda, but at the same time,
Your mom's saying.
yeah. But no, I mean it's a good point. I mean, there's probably some transference there where it would be handled in a similar fashion.
But he didn't try to force him to stop. He didn't call police. He didn't arrest him or anything.
Yeah, we didn't put him in jail.
Right. So it seems like you have the choice to do this, but now go rethink it and maybe think about doing something different.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Though that does go into a whole nother question that we'll have to revisit at some point about whether the mind trick is actually use of force.
Right,
yeah.
Right. There should be no national ID card. We put maybe on this one just because we have no evidence either way. And we definitely need to replace that question eventually. End corporate welfare. No government handouts to business.
Yeah.
Well, there was a lot of government purchasing things from business. Obviously, building the Death Star, building Star Destroyers. Obviously, the government itself can't build all of that.
Yeah.
But
so
is that really a subsidy, a handout? No, not really.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of thinking along the same lines. So with those clones also came all the ships. They come in with all the different ships, and the Jedi have their own starfighters and whatnot. Who's paying for this? So it's got to fall at least in the middle on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we put maybe on that one. In government barriers to international free trade, and we actually have evidence for this one in episode 1.
Yeah, with the blockade.
Right.
Yep.
The blockade
which pretty much kicked off the series.
Right. So we put agree for that one. Let people control their own retirement, privatize Social Security. Again, this is one that we really can't fit in the Star Wars universe. So we put maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Replace government welfare with private charity. We put disagree, and I don't recall why.
Well, I think we put this as disagree because, again, I think it fell back to we're depending on government in some way. Does the Jedi Council get donations? Maybe. I mean, maybe that's perhaps how they get some of their money. Maybe they don't get it all that way. So maybe they feel that they've got to have a guaranteed amount to sustain their operations.
Yeah, I wonder if some planets, if the Jedi came to stop the Separatists from taking over that planet, if maybe people in that planet donated some money to the Jedi. Do we have any evidence of that? I don't recall.
No, I mean, I can look into it and see, but I don't really remember any of that. It's more of a, thanks for helping us out. We'll help hide your ships or whatever. Right. And, but at that point, if they've already taken over that planet essentially or protected it, then they know it's a safe haven for the Jedi and clones, at least as far as in that era.
And the last one is cut taxes and government spending by 50% or more. And obviously in the middle of a war, which was a good part of the Star Wars world that we've lived in. Star Wars, imagine that. But obviously wars are expensive. Wars are the health of the state.
Yeah, somebody paid for those clones.
Right. Right. And the Death Star. I mean, I can't recall. It was some astronomical sum of money if that were actually built today, what it would cost. And it's more money than even exists.
Yeah, and I try to picture it I try to see that as the Empire because we're talking about Yoda in particular here with this one. So I kind of look at it from...
We are, but there were also a lot of massive ships bought.
Exactly.
As well. So, I mean, it's obviously... Yeah, you're right. It's the Empire, but still.
Yeah, if their funding was cut, would they even be able to purchase... Oh, we need more clones.
Right.
So to fight the clankers.
Yeah,
so,
clones aren't cheap, I would imagine.
No.
So we put, with these answers, we put the personal issue score at 50%, and the economic score at 40%, which puts them pretty much dead center in the centrist category.
Yeah, which is a little surprising to me, to be honest. So
Yeah, it is for sure. So definitely, please, send us some questions to replace some of these. That's kind of why I read all of these out this time, so that you can, some of our listeners can kind of help us out with massaging this quiz to be more appropriate for the Star Wars universe. And again, you can email Brian at
ResistTheEmpire.com.
ResistTheEmpirePodcast.com.
ResistTheEmpirePodcast.com.
Right. Yeah, somebody else owns ResistTheEmpire.com. Darn it.
Tatooine Times. Here's the latest news you need to know from the Star Wars canon movies, TV shows, books, comics, and more.
Yeah, so tonight on Tatooine Times, we're going to talk about kind of what's going on with the Star Wars news. Rebels is back from its break, and it was kicked off with an awesome episode called Legacy of Mandalore.
Please don't ruin it. I've still only seen season 1 of Rebels.
Oh, wow.
No spoiler warnings.
So you haven't seen season 2 of
I haven't
Rebels?
seen season 2 yet.
Oh,
that's what I'm
gosh.
saying. So
All
we
right.
have got to set
Yes,
up
Roger. Roger's got to catch up then if
sure.
we're going to keep talking about Rebels, which we will definitely keep talking about because it's one of the things that we get to see on a weekly basis, essentially. So it was a great episode. I don't really know how much I could talk about it to not ruin anything for Roger, but
What was it was Legacy of Mandalore.
Yeah.
Was the name of it.
Yep. So it was basically it's one of Sabine's story arcs, and so she has the black saber, and I'm not going to go into a description about what that is.
Well,
Anybody that's watching knows that's.
I want to see the black saber in one of the new Star Wars movies. I want to see that so bad.
Well, actually, you've probably seen the black saber because it was in Clone Wars.
Oh yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
it. I've seen it in Clone
Yeah.
Wars. I mean, in one of the actual films. I want to see it make a play in one of the films.
Yeah, so that reminds me of Rogue One,
Right.
where that black saber was one of the projects that Jen Erso was reading through when she was trying to find their file. Yep. So, so I'm very excited about that. I would love to see that as well in a future movie, even if it's just some spinoff, whatever. I don't care. Give it to me. I want to see it now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it was a great episode. I would say there was a somewhat significant death in there.
Ooh.
I mean, significant in the fact that it was a character that we've seen before that caused some trouble. So I don't want to spill the beans too much more on that with Roger not having seen him. But don't worry,
and also
folks,
our
I'll get them
listeners-
caught up.
Our listeners as well. We don't want to spoil too much.
Yeah.
Now, if the way I see it, and I guess that this is something that we need to, I guess, kind of figure out, how do we want to handle spoilers on this show? If you've got some ideas, guys, please let us know. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Twitter is Empire Resistor. Please let us know how you feel about spoilers because, Brian Sovereign, who does Sovereign Tech, another podcast that I listen to quite heavily. It's another very technical and geek-oriented podcast. He's a big Star Wars, Star Trek fan. So definitely check him out. But he doesn't care about giving out spoilers because he thinks that, if you're listening to his show, you've had an opportunity to see whatever he's talking about.
Yep. Now
I can understand that perspective. But at the same time, I know I hate to get spoiled. I hate to see a spoiler.
This episode it came out a week ago. So I feel like that's pretty much fair game at this point. If I were to speak on it, I just don't want to ruin it for you. What I will say, though, is there's actually a very libertarian way this death comes about.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, so can you talk about it without revealing who died?
Yeah, I guess. Essentially, Sabine is in a position where she can take someone out, and she chooses not to do that. It's also very reminiscent of a scene in one of the major films as well that I don't want to give out because I don't want to. I want you to be surprised when you see it.
Sure.
But she decides against what happened in this previous film, and it's essentially, all right, you've given up. I'm going to walk away now, and then someone else in defense of her ends up finishing it.
Wow,
So
okay.
yeah, so
Interesting. Yeah.
so it was a gratifying episode as well. I would say it's one of the better ones I've seen this season.
Well,
so.
our homework is to go back and start watching Rebels again. I've got to start from episode 1, and we need to start doing that. Watch several of them a night. And
Absolutely.
Get caught up.
Yeah, I
You
could.
can't get enough Star Wars.
No, yeah, I could watch it 100 times
Sure.
to be honest. I really think that I was a little worried. I think with Rebels when it started off, I didn't know how I felt about Ezra's character. I was kind of not down after Clone Wars, but I really enjoyed Clone Wars.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, all right, well, how are we going to follow this one up? Very, very pleased with this episode. I think everyone will enjoy it.
Great.
The other bit of information that I want to talk about is the last of the Aftermath trilogy books is out. The Aftermath Empire's End.
And let me tell you, I've been reading Star Wars novels since the early 90s. And I have loved, of course, a lot of that is no longer canon, but I love reading Star Wars novels. And I've read dozens of them. But this Aftermath series is an incredible series of books. I have not read the last one, but the first two, just incredible writing.
Yep, so that's by Chuck Wendig. He's the one that did the other two. This is the third in the Aftermath trilogy. It only came out 4 days ago, I think. And I have not read any of them, and now I'm glad that it's finished because now I will go get all three and read all three. After Game of Thrones, I don't really care for waiting for a book for I don't know how long it's going to take. So I will wait till that series is finished, then I will start it. So I've actually not started it, but I will.
Well, I've got the first one. I'm almost positive I've got the second one too, so I'll loan them to you. So yeah, it's a great series of books, and so much. And that's one of the reasons we're starting this podcast. Is so much of the new canon material outside of TV and film is some of the best Star Wars stuff that's ever been put out. Some of the books are just fascinating. You've got the Star Wars Aftermath, and then Aftermath Life Debt was the second one in the trilogy, and then, of course, Empire's End is the third. So definitely check these out. Chuck Wendig, if I'm not mistaken, he wrote some of the original non-canon stuff now as well.
Okay.
I may be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure about
Before they wipe the slate clean.
Prior before Disney. But anyway, it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, so that's all I got for Tatooine Times. So
all right, so we'll just kind of wrap this up. So this is our very first episode, as you guys are fully aware, and we are very much open to we're doing this show because we love Star Wars and because we love liberty, and there's a natural kind of fit there for both of us. So primarily, we're doing this show for you guys, for the listener. So we want feedback from you. Please, let us know how you want to see this show, what you want to hear on this show. And we are absolutely open to to anything. We may or may not take your suggestions, but please give them to us.
yeah, we're definitely open to ideas, segment ideas. Anything you feel would kind of fit in well with what we're looking to do here. I'd like to essentially bring more people into Liberty with Star Wars as that hook.
Or bring more people into Star Wars who are already into liberty, even.
Which seems silly to me because
Right.
everyone should be into Star Wars.
Absolutely. Well, everybody should be into liberty as well.
I agree with
How
that.
that goes. There are definitely more people into Star Wars than there are into true liberty. That's
It seems
a
that way.
sad state of affairs for sure.
We'll work on fixing that.
Right. But there's a few ways you can catch us. You can catch us on Twitter at Empire Resistor. We're also on Facebook at Resist the Empire Podcast. Our website is resisttheempirepodcast.com. Our email addresses are our first names, Brian and Roger. So yeah, get with us, and if you can, one thing that really will help the show progress and help us do some new cool things and maybe some events and stuff is become a supporter of the show. Go to resisttheempire.com/support and drop us some money, and you can get some swag and some rewards. And make sure to subscribe to the show at resisttheempire.com/subscribe. You can subscribe on any podcatcher. We're on YouTube as well, iTunes, you name it. So, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think we're out of here like Vladimir.
Thanks so much, guys, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Resist the Empire. Find us online at resisttheempirepodcast.com and on Twitter at Empire Resistor. Never miss an episode by subscribing on any podcatcher or by going to resisttheempirepodcast.com/subscribe. This has been a Pax Libertas Productions podcast.